Okay, it seems like we are just live at another episode of Dojo Live. And today we're going to have a very special guest, Mr. Joe Gough, CEO at Homeward Healthcare, and Mico Malecki. He's the CTO for the company. And also, I'm honored to have Mr. Matt Perez as a co-host. So I want to welcome you all. We're broadcasting live from Nearsoft's Hermosillo headquarters, and which is the largest building that we have. And right now, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of things, but the focus today, one of the main topics, is called digital humanism. Now, some of us might be wondering exactly what digital humanism is. So we're going to be talking about that also, and of course we're going to be talking about other technical aspects of very, very diverse nature. So that's where the CTO Mico is here, and so he's going to be also getting back to you folks out there. And also I want to remind the audience that they can interact with us by means of clicking on the option that you can see on our screen, on the player and our page, which is located at the lower left-hand side of the window. And just click there. We'll get your questions. We'll read them back to Joe and Mico, and basically that's the way it's going to work out. All right, Joe. One of the things that we have set up a whole bunch of questions and things of interesting things to talk about today, but I was intrigued about something very, very unique about you as a person, and I say this because you mention it very, very openly in your LinkedIn profile, and it's very relevant to what we do here at Nearsoft as a culture, culturally speaking. You're talking about achievements. You're talking about setting up the goals, and the first one I see is, as a number one, is be a good husband, father, and friend. So, and that's it speaks a lot about how you envision work and what place work has in your life. So, what did you decide? Why is this important? Why did you label it as number one? That was like a personal kind of question that I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, well, I think that the philosophy of leadership within an organization permeates through the entire culture of that organization. We see this in athletics all the time with coaching, where a new coach comes into a program and the demeanor, all of the influential factors that leadership can bring to an organization can almost immediately be seen because the team starts to take on the personality of the coach. Mm-hmm. So I think it's inherent upon the leadership role to walk the walk, right? If you're going to be a company that stresses digital humanism and the interaction of using technology to better society's goals and your personal goals, then you have to start with your own personal life. And husband, father, and friend is my focal depth as far as personal relationships go. And then, eventually what ends up happening if you have a good corporate culture is that your employees become your friends, and then it all factors into the organic development of the company.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm totally with you, and I just wanted to have you elaborate a little bit more on that, because it's equally as important for us as well as a company, culture-wise. Thank you, Joe. Now, one more thing. Now let's move on to the main topic of today, which is digital humanism. Now, you chose this particular topic, and actually, it's the entire name, the full name is the title of the talk is Digital Humanism and Technology's Potential Impact on Health and Social Conditions. So, why did you choose this particular topic, and how is it relevant for our talk today?
Well, especially in the healthcare space, but we see this in a lot of industries that have complexity in their root structure. right? I mean, complexity is just a fundamental piece of the healthcare industry. And whenever there's complexity in the foundation of an industry, you have situations where the human interaction gets trumped by some of the technologically advanced solution sets that are introduced. In healthcare, you see the presence of this in the electronic medical records industry, or the electronic healthcare medical record, as it pertains to enterprise class software embedded in the hospital environment, in the primary care setting, in the post-acute setting. They don't communicate with one another, right? They weren't developed interoperably to communicate with one another in these different settings of healthcare. And that has led to a variety of bad outcomes for the patients, for the human beings that are involved with participating in this system in our country, in the U.S., certainly. So, you know, when we start to try to get our arms around how we correct things like that, we look at it as digital humanism being this foundational element of, did we create these things fundamentally to bring caregiver and patient closer together in interaction? This is not just a technology of convenience. It's a technological solution that needs to better the outcomes, increase the privacy, increase the value of the interaction between the participants. And if we don't have all of those fundamentals aligned, then we're missing that point. And you need that North Star sometimes when you get deep into the weeds and you're in hackathon mode for 48 hours and you look up and you've programmed into a rabbit hole, and you need to just kind of take a deep breath, sit back and say, what am I doing? Why am I here? What is my purpose with this? And that always helps inform the process more holistically.
Okay. Well, as I was listening to you, something else came into my mind because, and this is pertaining to the dealing with humans. You use kind of that phrase. Now, as far as I understand, digital humanism, what is known today as digital humanism, it also a lot of people feel that it also seeks to enable people, humanity, to achieve things they never believed possible, right? Or maybe they redefine the way their goals can be achieved. Okay, how does this apply to the healthcare segment?
Okay, well, yeah, I'll use it across all segments, but then I'll put a descriptive point of emphasis on healthcare. Mm-hmm. The history of digital humanism isn't recent. It isn't a part of the computing age. It actually goes back to Thomas Watson, one of the founders of IBM, and Father Frederick Bussa at the Vatican in Italy, talking about the works of St. Thomas Aquinas and how they were going to catalog them in what was new in 1949 as the first large-scale digitization project. And what the Vatican said was, we're not going to participate with your newfangled technology unless it's going to provide the betterment, right, for our parishioners, right, for, in this particular case, the Catholic faith. If digitizing all of these documents and categorizing them in this, kind of first OCR project, if it's going to bring people closer to the work of St. Thomas Aquinas, then beautiful. Then we're all in. But we need to have some rules in the way we're going to conduct this process. So that informed the way that IBM moved forward in a lot of their philosophies towards the digital era through the 1950s, through the 1960s, into the computing age. And now you're starting to see the adoption of it from companies that are more in the data analytics side, like Gartner, where they've actually started to break it up into rules now. And the most recent discussion of digital humanism, it's what is the interaction value between human and interface? What is the privacy factor, right? Am I sacrificing anything as a human being in this interaction with your digital interface? And then what is my net outcome, right? What is my win that I can extract from this to better society? Not just to better my work, and this is what we talked about first, right? You talked about work-life balance and how that all factors in for me personally. If all this does is drive us to be more insanely workaholic and doesn't create better quality of life in the end for me, for my family, for my neighborhood, for my town, for my state, extrapolate that out further and further, then how much good are we actually doing? That's the question that we ask. But Mico can probably describe how he lets that inform the programming process.
Yeah, that would be absolutely awesome. So, Mico, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what's exciting as well is that as we approach this sort of imminent global technoculture, we have to face a bunch of other environmental and cultural factors that we haven't had to before. So this idea of acknowledging that and using artificial intelligence and network computing to empower humans to ensure that in context of all these new developments, we're still focused on actually making sure that we get what it is that our original goal was, which is the improved quality of life that all this technology is supposed to provide for us, right? So it's, I mean, the actual specifics of programming around that, I mean, we could discuss that for hours. I mean, do you want to get into anything specific?
Well, probably yes. I think, and this is going to be my not my final question, but my final question of this segment, because I'd like to pass on the mic to Matt as well. From the development standpoint, from the creative side of software engineering, how does digital humanism? How would you say digital humanism drives innovation? Or does
well,
it?
they say that the necessity is the mother of invention, right? So it's like as we are encountering all these new cultural and environmental factors, we have no choice really. We have to create new solutions to maintain and improve our quality of life.
And the barriers to entry factor into that too, right? I'm sure that Nearsoft is encountering challenges on a daily basis that were man-made challenges created by bad architecture. So when bad architecture is facing you, you have to innovate pretty quickly. You have to iterate and pivot, and that's all innovation. So sometimes your hand is forced, but in the end, it's great to have that moral compass guiding you towards the social benefit that's the end desserts, if you will.
Okay. Okay. Thank you both, Matt. I'd like to pass on the mic to you. I believe that you had assembled several topics that you wanted to discuss today with Joe and Mico. So, please.
Yeah,
the mic is all yours.
All right, thanks. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, so no, this is pretty interesting so far. The whole conversation around the North Star is what we call our cause, our noble cause. But it's the same idea. Is you have to have something that you never get there, right? You never get to accomplish it or whatever, but it guides you in, particularly, as you said, when you're in hackathon mode. I really like that.
Yeah.
So
there's no perfection in a hackathon, right? It's just modes of success. It's little tiny victories.
Yeah, if that. And so one thing that occurred to me is how does this inform, for example, the user experience? Talking about now a product. How does that inform your user experience design? How do you go about developing and what your choices are, etc.?
Yeah, so we have a construct or a mantra within that mission statement that we've been discussing here, that digital humanism vision, and we're always talking about pain versus pleasure. You can tell we're not big academics, right? We try to simplify everything. So patients are dealing with a lot of pain, and when you ask them to do additional things right? When they get home in their care plan and in self-recovery and in self-improvement, without giving them any benefit, without helping them visualize through the data the outcome of good health and what good health could mean to their life if they would follow this digital care plan, if they would track with a Fitbit their wearable vital signs. If you don't give them any reason to do that, the pleasure side of it will always be left wanting, and the pain will win out. And when pain wins out and discomfort wins out, you end up with a lot of people who have unrealized goals, and they feel worse and worse because they never got that initial victory. So we try to look at pain versus pleasure in the idea that I need to give you, the user, in the interface, I need to program for you something simple that is a win for you, where you hit that button and it feels like a win. It's immediate gratification. I just did something and I earned points, or I just did something and I got the result I was looking for. That kind of emotional impact on the user interface is always going to help you get closer and closer to your end goal, which in our world is sustainable wellness and getting people onto programs that are going to keep them out of the hospital.
And another theme that seems to be resurfacing a lot, and that we have to really force ourselves to pay special attention to, is that a lot of times technology actually ends up, specifically in the context of wellness and digital humanism, is technology ends up actually putting people farther apart than bringing them closer together. So everything that we develop, we actually pay special attention to that aspect of it, is that we want to make sure that we don't fall into the category of people who want to improve the quality of life, but then inadvertently actually separate humans from each other.
So can you give me an example of that, of the bad actors or the bad cases of something that makes you further away rather than closer?
Yeah. So for example, a lot of tools that are labeled to be like productivity tools. For example, let's say a nurse has a one-on-one interaction with a patient. There are a lot of tools for nurses to aid in that interaction. But we noticed that a lot of situations where they're using these tools, the tools are actually separating the patient from the nurse, meaning that instead of directly interacting with the patient one-on-one and truly paying attention to the patient, the nurse is got her head down in an iPad app trying to enter data and make sure that she's doing everything correctly with the app. Meanwhile, she's ignoring the patient.
Yes.
Yeah, we call it, in the hospital settings, they'll call it the cow, and the COW is computer on wheels, and that just means that she brings the cow in, and she's pecking away at the cow and not paying attention to the patient. If you're paying too much attention to the cow and not enough attention to the patient, that's a bad separation for us.
Okay. So how have you addressed that in the whole discharge area, that's what your product's about, right? Particularly.
Yes. Yeah, so we've taken one angle on it, and I'll bring up another angle that we're not currently participating, but some of our partner organizations are. Mm-hmm. Our piece of this is patient-directed interactive media. So all of the applications that we present to the patient, they get handed off to the patient. They're tutorialized so the patient can learn how to use a touchscreen if they've never used it before. They put the headphones on, they hear it, they see it, they touch it. It's triple sensory for comprehension and compliance, and now the patient is going through their instructions, their Q&A, to inform the data set of the entire process. So if we're doing trend analytics and predictive analytics going forward based on what kind of a person you are demographically, the way you answer questions psychologically, and then maybe what some of the other behavioral or public records outcomes are that we can see in your clinical data from your health record, when we marry all those factors together, we can find some really interesting cross indexes that will tell us what's going to happen next in your healthcare path if you don't get on an interventional solution scope.
Oh, very good. And so do you also do any kind of compliance tracking? Or
Yeah. So most of that happens in our dashboards. You know, the database side of what we do is constantly running algorithms against these risk profiles, and those attributes live in a dashboard that the practitioners, the care providers, can constantly monitor both what a patient looks like today and how a patient's compliance is interacting tomorrow and the next day, and even when they're outside of the hospital as we message them remotely. There are other organizations that are doing natural language processing for this, right, where the patient can, rather than interact through tactile, they can simply speak to the tool, and through natural language processing, they're able to pick up enough of the answers and the keyword responses to create at least an interesting enough dialogue to make the applications work effectively and give the right risk indication. We're starting to work with some of those. It's not our specialty, but it's another example of how interaction within these applications can be really, really successful and can be really innovative in a way that doesn't tax the healthcare worker that's already overburdened.
Mm-hmm. And it's still accessible, if you will, to the patients, which are now. The other question I have is, not all patients are created equal. You have people who are well educated and can handle this technology stuff easily, and then there's the people at the other extreme who are not well educated, or for whatever reason don't handle. They're older, what have you, and can't handle the technology stuff. So how do you manage those two cases, or the whole spectrum, really?
So we try our best to make sure that it's Joe likes to call it triple sensory. So even if they can't read it, they're able to hear it, and as well we transcribe it into multiple languages. So we really try to be as accessible as possible.
It's written at a fifth grade education. It has tutorials on the front end to show a user who's never used a touchscreen before how to use it in the first place. And if you are truly infirmed, meaning you're too frail to even interact with the technology in any way, shape, or form, then on the front end we also have a filter that allows us to know whether it's the caregiver that needs to take the assessment or whether it's the patient that's taking the assessment. Because sometimes you have a patient that's so infirmed, their caregiver or their husband, their wife, their child needs to be the one that's actually interacting with the interface.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. So going back to the digital humanism, and you said that's the North. So is that the North Star for the company, or just the two of you, or how does that work?
Definitely for the company. You know, one of the I was in venture capital before I was in technology, sold a technology company, went into the VC side of it, came back into entrepreneurship because I like getting my hands dirty and working with actual problems and
good for you.
Getting into the human interaction. But one of the things that you end up coming to grips with is that I don't want to be involved in what we called in VC vitamin companies. Right? There are companies that are vitamins. They're going to make the world a little bit better and supplement something that's already going on. I want to be involved in companies that are painkillers. Right? They are solving a problem that is a pressing concern right now. It's a bleeding issue that needs a solution, or we're going to have a major death in the family. And that's the problem in healthcare that we see in the United States, in the UK. Sadly, I don't have enough information to tell you if it's the same problem in Mexico that we have in the United States, but it's issues about length of stay. Mm-hmm. It's issues about inadequately being discharged with the wrong medications or the wrong care plan, and then finally medical errors due to stressful conditions of the workforce in hospitals, overworked, underpaid. You've heard all the same stories that we've heard.
Yeah, I think that's universal. I
agree.
Applies in other countries as well. Particularly the part about the healthcare workers being overworked, overstressed, and all those things. But what I was getting back around was the thing of digital humanism as your North Star, right? The thing that everybody has in the back of their heads as they're working problems, etc. So what does it look like on a daily basis for you guys? How does it get down to practice and reality?
How do you use it as far as setting direction when you've been tasked with it?
I mean, I think, you know, some of the more challenging aspects of it are, for example, situations where the interests of, for example, a medical institution don't seem to be directly aligned with the interests of the patient. So that's would be the example that comes to mind first, where you have to actually make really difficult decisions where, in some cases, you know, that they could have a financial impact on the company, but ultimately, you know, we have to keep the interest of the user and the patient in mind. And so I think, you know, us keeping that, you know, front and center helps us make those decisions. And
yeah, and one of the examples of what Mico just discussed, I'm glad he sparked that. You know, we had to make the very difficult decision of whether or not we were going to share the exact answers that the patient gave to psychosocial assessments, behavioral health assessments.
Mm-hmm.
We decided that that was the patient's personal experience within our application, meaning we would share their risk score, right, the overall risk complexion of one particular patient, but we will not share the way they answered each individual question. So if I ask you, how many alcohol drinks do you have per week? You tell me 9, and I say, well, that falls at this certain risk dimension versus 12 or 15 or 2, right? I'm not going to tell the hospital or your insurance company or anybody else that you have 9 drinks per week. I'm going to protect that information, and I'm just going to tell your practitioner